Good morning, folks, or good afternoon, or wherever you are and whatever time you watch this. May this find you all well. Another episode of CIOs and Bowties with myself and Chief Economist David Crook of ACG Wealth. Hey, David, how you doing?
Good morning, Greg. Well, I guess it's good evening where you are right now. It's good morning where I am in Atlanta.
Well, the sun is shining behind me, and as you know, as you don't know, our topic today is really I think it's kind of fascinating as we watch, how the geopolitics is going, how the world is splitting, and tech, how it is ascending, let's say, in India. We're going to speak about a company called JIO Partners, and I'll leave that to David to walk us through that. But hence the background, the Taj Mahal, it's a bit of an Indian theme today, although it can also be called kind of an India versus China theme, David. So, let's just dive right into it. And maybe you can tell us, set this up for us, if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about, why India, why not some other country in Southeast Asia? What's the focus now?
Greg, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. How many times in the past decade or so have we said, this is India's time, the world's largest democracy, and it is time for them to start growing and start influencing the globe from an economic and growth perspective? It hasn't really happened. Perhaps JIO Platforms, the spin-off from Reliance Industries and from Mukesh Ambani's Reliance Industries is the start of all this. And 1.3 billion people, 1.35 billion people, whatever the number is, a number very similar to that of China, maybe a tad less, but a huge consumer economy could develop in that country. And it might be the time that we begin to see India coming to the fore and start contributing to global growth, just like China's done over the last 4 decades. With that being said, Asia's wealthiest man, according to Forbes, Mr. Ambani, genius, I think, strategy of spinning off JIO Platforms from Reliance late last year, I believe. And with that being
November,
said,
I think it was.
Yeah, picked up all the debt. So there's a debt-free entity out there waiting for capital. And my goodness, has capital flown in. It's coming from all over the globe. It's coming from the Saudi Sovereign Fund. It's coming from Facebook. It's coming from other California, some private equity companies. There are stories now that Google is considering a $4 billion investment in JIO Platforms. And they've raised something in excess of $15 billion in 5 months. That's a lot of money by anyone's standards. And their strategy has been fascinating. They entered the market, started with voice, and gave all new users 7 months of free voice, and they charge for the data. So we're going to have a platform in play here, with e-commerce, talk, streaming, payment methods, education, and JIO is going to be the new Alibaba. It's going to offer everything to the Indian population and beyond, I would think, Greg.
Yeah, so let me chime in. I'll add a few stats if you want around JIO that will be helpful. So with the 15 billion that's been raised, it now has a valuation of 71 billion, I think. The 15 billion was essentially the sale of 20 or 25% of the company. The company is essentially debt-free. As you said, it was spun out of Reliance Industries. I'm not totally sure of the situation, but I know Reliance Industries, perhaps the original founder or somebody in that genealogy actually passed away, and there was a bit of a battle, a boardroom battle over Reliance. It's a huge conglomerate, huge Indian conglomerate. So they have thoughtfully spun this out, debt-free. It came out, the primary asset, I believe, is JIO, I don't know if you say JIO or JIO Mobile, which has 400 million users. I mean, just the scale is always crazy when you talk about India or China. 400 million users. And again, the opportunity there is the upsell of 400 million users into voice or data, as it were. So we'll push the geopolitical discussion out to the next part, or part 3 of our discussion, as to why JIO might outperform an Alibaba going forward. But let's take a few seconds to talk about India itself. why is India right for this mushroom development?
India. So I'd mentioned a little earlier, the world's largest democracy. That is both an advantage and a disadvantage. So we consider what China's done. Obviously, not a free society, and I'm one of those that is very anti-China at the moment, given some of the behaviors, over the decades and certainly in the recent past. But with that being said, being a democracy is both an advantage and a disadvantage. And you quite rightly pointed out to me when we were discussing this, another huge advantage for India is that it's an English-speaking country by and large. So that in and of itself is advantageous in terms of world trade, global trade. The internal politics is complicated in India. Because it's a democracy, there are power players all over the place. The regions and the governors associated with those regions are extremely powerful, and it's very hard to pass legislation and change rules. Whereas in China, that's not the case. The Communist Party makes a decision, President Xi wants to do something, and off we go. It gets changed there and then. That's not the case in India. That's the disadvantage of the democracy. However, as we've said, 100 million people, 1.3 billion people, 400 million on the platform to date, it would seem. The sky's the limit.
Staggering. Yeah, so let me respond to that a little bit on the India side. I think the British colonialists instituted the Raj system, which is basically like a feudal system or a baron system, where there was a Raj in charge of certain areas or states, as it were. So that's how that came to be. Now, we speak about that being kind of a antiquated system or feudal system, and we say India's beset with problems with bureaucracy and corruption. There's a ton of corruption. We know about some of that in the cricket side of things, but anyway, that's another discussion. But the point being is that China was not terribly dissimilar when the Chinese century came around. If you look at China going back to just as far as maybe the 1990s, you would have found very underdeveloped country, a lot of feudal type, system. There was the Mao uprising. So just to tell folks who are watching this that one should try and look beyond the horizon and not just say that it's a hopeless situation just because there's bureaucracy and corruption. Okay, Dave, that's a great intro. Let's leave it there for a few minutes. We'll take a short break. When we come back, let's delve into this a little bit more. Let's talk more about the lines around capital raising that's been going on in India. We can also talk about the landscape. And Forbes is saying we're witnessing the birth of a modern India. So maybe we can get into that a little bit more.